If you're tired of chasing cold leads or burning cash on ads, Jessica Rhodes offers a better way. Podcast guesting, which I love this topic. Learn how to position yourself for high impact interviews, connect with pre qualified audiences, and convert listeners into clients without losing your authenticity. Welcome to the Lead Machine Growth Show. I'm Paul Guyan, the Lead Machine Coach, the founder of the Lead Machine Marketing Group and Mastermind, and I'm dedicated to helping you tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream life. So whether you're just getting started or want to take your business to the next level, let's get this conversation started and turn your dreams into reality. Jessica Rhodes, I've known her since I think 2014. She was just getting started, but amazingly, she founded Interview Connections, the world's first and leading podcast booking agency in 2013, back when there are no other agencies like it existed. So she's a pioneer. Since its founding, Interview Connections has booked over 30,000 podcast interviews for over 800 clients, which is super impressive. She is passionate about helping entrepreneurs who feel like the best kept secret grow their business online through genuine human to human connections. Yes, the interviews she has and her team have booked have helped her clients generate millions of dollars in sales and sell thousands of books. And here, a little personal, what I really admire about her is how she shows up with authenticity. And we'll talk a little bit about that human connection that's so important. She's real easy to talk to. I've met her way back in the beginning before she did all these great things. She was just getting started. It's great to have you on the show, Jessica. I appreciate you coming back and chatting with us today.
Of course, Paul. Thank you so much for having me. It's always so fun to connect with a business owner who I've known for over a decade.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And I got your book when it came out too.
I love that. Thank you.
And I went podcast guesting. Gosh, I don't know. Yeah, but it's great. And being a podcast host and having had some great guests and some not so great guests, it's interesting to see how well prepared or how not well prepared these really successful people, they just show up and they say, yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. Wow. So what are the steps someone should take to lay a strong foundation for their guesting strategy?
Yeah. So, just like with any lead generation strategy, any marketing plan, there has to be a foundation laid ahead of time. People think, oh, I'll just get on a podcast and just do the interview and I'm sure it'll
Right.
work, or let's see if it works. That's usually it. Let's see if it works. Let's test it. It's not going to be successful if you don't have a plan in place, if you don't lay a strong foundation. So the first couple of steps, and this is what we do with all entrepreneurs that we work with, is what are your goals for podcast guesting? That's one of the first questions I always ask people, whether I'm on a call with them, we're teaching a training, talking with them. What are your goals? Because what your goals
Mhm.
are going to determine what do you need to be interviewed about, and then what types of shows do you need to be interviewed on. That's basic 3 point plan: is what are your goals, what do you need to be interviewed about? So that would be the suggested topics that you give a podcast host that's interviewing you. And then what types of shows do you need to be interviewed on? Like, what type of podcast would your ideal clients be listening to learn more about the solutions you offer? So those are really, like, at its very basic, the first few steps of laying a strong foundation. It's getting clarity on those three things.
And do you find that business owners really struggle with that to say, how do you help them through that process?
Yeah, I ask, sometimes you have to ask the question a couple different ways. Your goals, sometimes people are like, oh, to get booked. I'm like, but why? Why do you want to get interviewed?
To make sales.
Exactly. Yes, to make sales. Okay. And what do you need to make sales? Oh, I need leads. Okay. So where do you need those leads to go in order for them to ultimately buy? What is the journey that somebody takes from hearing about you for the first time to ultimately
Mhm.
becoming your client? I try not to say the word funnel because people hear funnel and they get super overwhelmed and they think they need a webinar and a tripwire and an email sequence and all of that. I'm like, yes, that's all, that is part of some people's funnels, but really a funnel is just a journey, an intentional journey that you're guiding someone through to ultimately becoming a client of yours. So if your goal is sales, then you want sales, then your goal should be getting more leads into my pipeline, getting more leads onto my email list or onto calls with me. So
Calls,
just
yeah.
getting really clear on what is the actual result that you're looking for, and being honest with yourself about that, because sometimes the goal changes. We have sometimes people will sign up with us and say, my goal is thought leadership, building my brand. And I say, that's fantastic. That is a little more ambivalent. There might not be a tangible ROI to thought leadership for many years. But if your goal is lead generation, then the topics on your one sheet are going to be different than if you're building your thought leadership, talking about your story and about things that you're passionate about and thought leadership type of things. So again, what your goals are is going to determine what the projected results are and how you're going to achieve those results.
And do you think that people sometimes focus more on their process of the transformation versus the result of their transformation, so they can't really articulate what value it is? So you walk them through that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people focus more on the result and less on the process actually. They're like, I need clients, I need clients.
Oh,
They
yeah.
don't stop to think about what are the steps somebody needs to take to become your client. Because podcast guesting, it's top of funnel brand awareness. It's people hearing about you for the first time. And so
Mm.
people think so much about the result, like an interview that they did will go live, and they're like, but I didn't get any clients from it. And then when I say, okay, how long is somebody typically in your ecosystem before they sign up? I just did this recently. I'm like, oh, on average, our clients are following us on our email list for 9 months. 9 month amount of time between when somebody joins our email list to becomes a client. So it would be silly of me to say, they heard me on a podcast. Why didn't they sign up tomorrow? That would be completely out of the norm. Now their sales might be shorter because they heard me on a podcast, but that's important context to have when you're evaluating how quickly will somebody become a client? How quickly will I meet my goal from podcast guesting?
Yeah. And what I meant about was the those topics that they have that they talk about. What I meant is many of the clients that I work with think about, I use this 3-point system to get this result. I said, what
Mm.
about what's the result that you get?
Oh,
And that's the
okay.
topic. That's the topic that you should be talking about. So let's talk about topics for a minute, just
Yeah.
since we poked at that.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying now. We were thinking about two different aspects of it, but
Yeah.
yeah, I totally agree with you. If your goal is to get clients, then talk about the result and talk about the way that you help clients get those results, because
Yeah.
ultimately your ideal clients are coming to you to solve a problem. Kind of talking about that in your interviews. One way that I teach about how to create your interview topics and questions are your topics, your interview topics should really communicate to the host and the listeners that you understand what their pain point is, you understand what their challenges are, and you can showcase how you can help them solve those problems.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that's important. Why do podcast listeners and hosts close so much easier than other kinds of leads?
Yeah, I love this because by the time when I do a sales call with somebody who has heard me on a podcast or listens to our podcast, they come and they're first of all, they're warm because they've already spent time
Hmm.
with me. They've already spent time listening to me speak. So there's no what makes you better than your competitors. There's no comparing. They're like, no, I already am sold on your company and on your expertise. I've also been educated. So we all know that when a client has been educated on our process, on like the things that we teach in our marketing, when they come like already having done some homework, they're an easier client to work with
Yeah.
because they're like, okay, I've already heard you talk about call to actions. I've already heard you talk about this and that. And so they're coming to you already ready to go. So they're easier to close because they're warmer, they've spent time with you, but they've also done some pre-work that you teach in your
Hmm.
marketing so that there aren't those obstacles in the way. So for example, with us, we teach that you want to have a good call to action to tell listeners on a podcast. If somebody has no idea what their call to action would be, they may be a yes on working with us. They may want to sign up, but they stop and say, oh, I'm not ready yet because I have to go figure this out. And you could lose the sale with somebody that actually wants to work with you, but they're not ready yet for some other reason. So your marketing, your podcast interviews, your podcast can get clients ready so that when they do have a sales call with you, there's nothing standing in their way.
Yeah. And that's when we talk about, and I've written some books recently that are just about to publish. And one
Awesome.
of them is called Speed to Trust. And building trust is super important, especially in the first few minutes of the podcast. How do you go about teaching people that how to do that?
Yeah, it's all about your storytelling. So, the
Mhm.
reasons podcasts build trust so quickly is because people are listening to you share stories. Like you said at the beginning of this, sharing stories about how like long we've known each other, how I was the first podcast booking agent in the market. Like just these stories are what earn people's trust. Because if I'm just some no name who's here to give facts, it's okay. She's just a voice with information. But when you share stories and allow people to get to know you through through your stories, they can then see themselves working with you. Like they can picture themselves in the room with you and imagining what it would look like to work with you. So stories are really what create this emotional connection with people that has them trusting you a lot more because emotions are what have us feeling connected to people.
Yeah, and I think showing a little bit of vulnerability helps, especially when you really screwed up or something. That's part of your Genesis story. Speaking of stories, do you have any maybe a case study where you help person bring out their story so that they had a signature story that they can tell or something like that? Maybe some just little snippets that they can use to help build trust?
Yeah, absolutely. My business partner Margie's a really great example because like when she first started with Interview Connections, I hired her as a guest booker as an contractor. She was met Interview Connections and then she became my first employee and then equal co-owner of the business in 2018. So when she was first co-owner of Interview Connections, nobody in the online world really knew who she was. Like she was working behind the
Yeah.
scenes in the business, but she was not an entrepreneur before coming to Interview Connections. So when it was time to really get visible and become a trusted leader in podcasting as co-owner of Interview Connections, her story is was a big part of it. So not only was she out there also
Hmm.
teaching about podcasting, but as she grew her confidence and got more visible, she really leaned into her personal story. And her story is incredible. I probably wouldn't even do it justice if I gave some snippets, but I will. We worked together at a nonprofit after college, like shortly after college. That's how we met. We went door to
Okay.
door
Yeah.
together. And so that was our experience. Like before I started Interview Connections, like right after college, we were working together at a nonprofit doing door to door field canvassing. And then we went our separate ways because we were in our early 20s. We did different things. I got married and started having kids. She went around the world to Asia to teach English. And we
Hmm.
reconnected through Facebook because her dad died by suicide and she had to get all of adopted. And
Oh boy.
so, halfway, all the way across the world, she's using Facebook to find people to foster these animals. And so, I reached out and I was like, yeah, I can take his cat. And so, I adopted his cat, whose name was Kitten. She just died actually. She was like
Oh,
19 years old, 20 years old.
wow.
Yeah. And so we reconnected and that's what led to her like being on each other's radar again. Then she started working for Interview Connections, but it was that connection and that had us come back together. And she shares that like that's just part of her story, but I'll share that story as well. And that is a part of our business story. That's how we came
Yeah.
together. Has nothing to do with podcasting, but it shows our story and it allows listeners to get to know us from a different viewpoint. And it took time to learn how to tell that story and see the value in that story too, because you don't always know what's we're all living our stories right now. That was one of the things that Margie would always tell me when in 2018, 2017. She's like, this is going to be a great story for a podcast one day. Like things you're experiencing right now, in
Yeah.
hindsight, once you've gone through the experience and you've learned from it, you'll be able to tell that story. So just know that everything you're living in life is one day going to be a story that you tell.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. I love that. And reaching out on Facebook and getting fostering
Yeah.
animals has nothing to do with podcasting, but it does humanize it.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to ask you though was, okay, you brought this is the power, I think, of when you're really good at something, you're not good at everything. So you brought Margie, is it Margie? Yeah.
Margie.
Margie, yeah, you brought her on for a reason, something like that. Maybe she was
Hmm.
had more skills in an area. I think business owners should do that. What was that? What was that thing that brought you together that just came so self-evident?
Yeah, I brought her on first as a guest booker because being a guest booker and pitching and booking podcast interviews, you have to be pretty resilient. You have to
Hmm.
rejection. You have to be persistent. You have to be a really hard worker. So all of that I knew she had from when we were canvassing. But then fast forward to when it was looking at becoming business partners and co-owners, she really could see the big picture of things much
Mm,
better than I could. I started this business doing the work, doing the pitching, doing the booking.
yeah.
And then I grew
Hmm.
into being a CEO. I grew into being a founder and entrepreneur who had a team. But then she came in with a lot of skill and vision for the future.
Mm,
We could
yeah.
take this to seven figures. Like she was able to zoom out in a way that I just still struggle with. I struggle to zoom
Yeah.
out. People are like, what's your projection of the future? And I'm like, I'm not sure.
That's Margie.
Ask Margie. She is just very gifted at that. And we've learned from each other. I've gotten better at it, but that's really what she brought is this vision and this ability to see the big picture of things, look at the business from a bird's eye view to see if the bit I always like thinking about business as a chessboard. I don't even know how to play chess, but what are the pieces that you need to move around to move forward? And she's just very good at that.
Yeah. And hope I didn't you didn't mind me asking that question, but
No,
this
I
is
love it.
about this is a show not just about lead generation, it's about having a business and growing it. And there's so many facets to it, which is why I've had so many variety of guests who have different expertise that I don't have. And I just love it, like having you on the show, because I'm not an expert at podcast guesting yet. What are some of the pitfalls of coaches? You mentioned coaches have a different thing. A lot of them have high tickets. A lot of them
Mhm.
want you to get on a call right away. There's what are some of those things that just come up?
Yeah, so some pitfalls are so a lot of times coaches, I just wrote some content about this. A lot of time coaches think that they need a much bigger audience than they act need to hit those goals, which is likely to get clients. There's thinking this is numbers game. I need to be on really big shows. I need to send
Hmm.
people to my Instagram or to my website. I need to grow followers. And it's not that growing an audience is a bad thing. Heck, we're talking about lead generation, we're talking about growth. That all is involves
Yeah.
visibility to new audiences. But a lot of coaches fall this pitfall of I need bigger audiences. I need more reach. I need this. It's this numbers game. I need to get people onto my email list, but then they're not actually using their email to nurture people. What I really advise coaches to do is focus on podcasts where the host is an ideal client. Don't even worry about the audience. Don't even worry about it. Don't stress out about
Mm.
lead magnets and funnels and all that stuff. Just look at this as a networking strategy. Like chances are,
Yeah.
if you're a coach, your clients are people that were referred to you, people that you've met face to face, person to person. They started working with you not through marketing, but just through relationships. And just look at podcast guesting as a way to amplify that. Talking with hosts
Mm.
before and after the interview, and just use it as a networking strategy. And once you really dial in your ability to network with podcast hosts, you can then expand to really being effective with converting the audience. But again, a lot of coaches just want to fast track to like these huge audiences, but just focus on the networking.
Yeah, and that's really why I started my podcast was exactly that. I needed to get visible. I needed to get my chops working on it and finally attracting the right kind of people. The audience was never how many downloads you have and all those things. I don't really keep track of those things because of this connection, the connection I have with you. We've reconnected after a decade,
Yeah.
and now there's potential between the two of us to do something together, whether I could become a client of yours or vice versa. And so that's how it works.
Yeah.
And really most coaches when they do land a sale, it's because of a relationship, not because of someone came through their funnel. And the funnel
Yeah.
could be a phone call.
Absolutely. We just did a podcast episode on the Interview Connections podcast called Podcast Guesting for Coaches. And the whole theme of the episode is that people hire a coach for who they are. You know, there's this affirmation song called by Tony Jones called I Get Paid to Be Me. And that's really
Mhm.
a coach's affirmation. You get paid to be yourself when you're a coach. And so
Ah,
getting on podcasts and doing podcasts just allows people to get to know you. That's it. Simple.
yeah. So, what are some of the key things that you look at when pairing a podcast guest with a podcast host? We've talked a bit, we poked at it a little bit, and we talked about that in the beginning. But what are
Yeah.
some of the key things that it's probably not metrics?
No, not metrics. People ask about that all the time. Do you look at the
Yeah,
audience size? It's not public. It's not public. There nobody
yeah.
knows how many downloads a show has unless you're the owner of that show and can log into the media host. So it's not downloads, but it really is. We do look at how many episodes have been published on that show because if somebody's just getting started, I think some 90% of shows don't publish more than 20 episodes. So we do want to see
Oh, wow.
that. Yeah, it's crazy. Like a lot of people start a show and then they lose steam and all this energy getting started, but then keeping it going is a whole other thing. It's just like in fitness, maintenance mode is the hardest mode, keeping it going. So we look at how many episodes the show has published, and we do look at the host website, their online presence. Again, not for the following and how big their audience is, but are they actually promoting their show? Are they posting on LinkedIn? Do they have an online presence and a brand that is in alignment with who our client is and their
Hmm.
online brand? We just look at all that, who the target audience is, and of course, the topic of the show, like the Lead Machine Growth Show. That's very much in alignment with me talking
Yeah.
about getting more clients from podcast guesting. And then we also look at things like once we really get to know a client, like I'll tell my booking team just my preferences, like the types of hosts I like to connect with, like long episodes, like hour plus episodes don't work well for me just because I'm like a very
Yeah.
like concise speaker. So I
Mhm.
there's only so much to say in one podcast interview about my topic. So I tend to like the 30 to 45-minute episodes as opposed to like hour plus. So then that comes down to just personal preference that we look at because we want you to mesh well with the host and have similar kind of communication styles.
Right. Unless we're talking about herding chickens, right? Then you can
Yeah.
talk for hours, right?
I know. Then there's those every so often. It's nice to have a podcast where you're like talking about stuff that's not just business, and then you can just chit chat for a long time.
Yeah. One of the things that I think that podcast guests really screw up, and that is what happens after they're on the show. What can coaches and people who are on podcasts, guesting business owners, no matter what they are, who they are, what can they do to make it work better for them?
Yeah. So, number one, keep track of all of your podcasts, have a spreadsheet with all of your podcast interviews
Hmm.
so that you do have a nice organized place to go back. Like maybe once a year or so, I'll go back and reach out to every podcast host that interviewed me to reconnect, maybe tell them something I'm working on, or just to maintain
Mm.
that relationship because podcast hosts are interviewing 50, 60, maybe upwards of 100 guests per year. So if you don't make the effort to stay on their radar, they'll forget about you. So stay in touch
Yeah.
with your host,
Yeah.
keep organized, and share about the episode. Post about it on LinkedIn or whatever social media platform you're most active on. Tag the host. You can get the YouTube link to the video interview and repurpose it into clips with something like Opus Pro. And that's an easy way to create short form media clips. And then share the interview with your list, share it with clients. Really leverage these interviews to get more people to listen to you.
Yeah, and if you're a regular guest, you can use that content for oh, guess what? You can do a weekly newsletter, and then which you probably didn't have yet,
Yep.
so you can put it in your newsletter, and that's just content that you've got content now that you already created once. You might as well use it 100 more times.
Exactly.
So,
It's the best content creation strategy because
yeah,
80% of the world are responders, which means they're people who their brilliance flows when they can respond to questions. And
yeah.
so when you're responding, capture that, turn it into written content, turn it into video clips, and use it.
Yeah, and you can use also with the AI search results. I think I forget what they call that. There's a feature results. It's really useful when you ask a question to Google.
Hmm.
If those questions are the ones that you answered in in a podcast interview and you write a blog post about it, or you have audio or video, you may be featured in one of those AI results because you're answering a question, which leads to the next thing is that how important are the questions that you load the host, you give them great questions that are just softball questions that you can just expose your expertise. So how important is that and how do you develop them?
Oh, it's so important because a lot of people, a lot of podcast guests think, oh, shouldn't the host come up with the questions? Well, that's not a great way to look at it. If you're trying to get on somebody else's show, you want to make it easy for the host, but also you want to be asked questions that tee you up to create the type of content that you want to use in your marketing. So if I
Ah,
didn't propose interview topics that have me speaking about the things that I want to speak about, I could be doing podcast interviews on things that are not actually going to support my marketing as much as they could if I suggested the topics and questions. So it's so important to come up with topics and questions so that the interview makes you look good and is usable for you. And you can change the topics and questions. Let's say you do 5, 10 interviews, then you change up your one sheet and give different suggestions. Let's say you get asked the same question over and you're like, I want to change that. I don't want to be asked that question anymore. You can change it for other interviews. So it just allows you to co-create the episode.
yeah. And you mentioned one sheet. What is that? I know speakers do them, but what
Yeah.
is a podcast one sheet?
So, a podcast one sheet is a one-page PDF, something that my dad and I created when I was first booking him on podcasts. Invented the podcast one sheet because, like you said, speakers have them, there's press kits, there's all types of media documents. But this is a
Yeah.
document that is specific to podcasts and it gives podcast hosts exactly what they need to say yes to a podcast guest and to be ready to interview them. So, a bio written in third person that they could read as the intro, some suggested topics, and some questions written in a way that they could just read it for the episode.
Yeah, and I think you want to make it easy for the podcast host to interview you, making it super easy, not have a lot of effort. Sometimes a podcast guest will give me a link to their Google Drive with all this stuff in it. But then I have to go, the host,
Mm-hmm.
this happens to me all the time. I have to go and look through it and say, okay, what can I use? What can, and I have an intake process that I expect people to fill out. And a good friend of mine, he didn't want to fill it out. And I want, just give it to your assistant. And then they still didn't fill it out. And because he was a friend, I had him on the show and I had to do some extra work to do it. And I did not like that. I did not like the fact that they didn't follow my intake process. So how
Right.
important is that?
Yeah, hosts set up these intake forms because the vast majority of guests don't have a one sheet. And so, like, our clients
Yeah.
will say they all have forms. Yeah, because most people don't have a one sheet. They needed to create a system to make it easy. And what I like about, so we create media kits for our clients. They are Google Drive folders, but it makes it okay. You need a headshot, you need a bio. Here it is. You can easily, as the guest, go copy and paste that information and put it into somebody's intake form.
Yeah.
Most podcast hosts, their intake forms ask a lot of the same questions. So a nice hack is to just have a Google Doc on for yourself that has all the information that is typically on these forms and just copy paste, copy paste, copy paste because you do want to be a good guest. You don't want to be super hard to work with and it's going to create a better relationship with the host when you follow their steps.
Because remember, they could become a client if you're targeting them
Exactly.
properly.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't believe I had a guest on just this week, and he had a book. He was very
Mm-hmm.
verbose. And fortunately, we have AI, and I was able to write his bio in third person, and I was able to take his story and distill it down into something that's easy to use. And fortunately, this guy's a friend and he's a potential client, and I want to work with him, maybe want to work with him. But yeah, I had to do a little bit of work to get him on the show to make it easy for the listeners and for me. Fortunately, I was using ChatGPT, and that's
Yeah.
easy to do. From the heart, what was the identity shift that you had to make? And did you experience along the way from being an organizer to an entrepreneur in this and an industry pioneer?
Oh, that's a really good question because the identity shift is I had to see myself as a pioneer. And I'll be honest, like sometimes it's still hard to see myself that way because
Mhm.
I am a pioneer. I did start the first ever podcast booking agency. I have taught thousands upon thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs how to leverage podcast guesting. And it's hard to see myself in that way because I don't feel like I look or come across as the type of entrepreneurs that I would expect, like the glamour shots. Like, I don't, I like the nod to chickens earlier was that like we have backyard chickens. I've
Yeah.
got two little kids. I'm a very authentic person. I'm very humble. And so I don't always see myself as, I don't know, some like big time 7-figure entrepreneur. I am a 7-figure entrepreneur. I did start the first ever podcast booking agency, but I don't always see myself that way. That's an, even 12 years in, that's still an identity that I have to remember. No, that is who I am.
Hmm.
And it's helpful to get interviewed on podcasts. Like one of my clients said it really well. What, gosh, how did she phrase it? I just had a call with her recently to just hear about her experience. And it was the same type of thing, like the identity and kind of the imposter syndrome, and not seeing
Hmm.
yourself as probably so many people see you. And when she said when I'm interviewed on podcasts, like hosts are reflecting back to me how they see me, which is like really built her confidence. And it's just like this reminder every time you're featured on a podcast and you hear a host like read your bio, you're like, oh, I am that girl. Like I am
Yeah.
that entrepreneur. And so it does help remind you who you are and the success you've had and the expertise you've had. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's definitely going to have me thinking.
Well, yeah, I know your dad, and I've worked with Jim Palmer, Captain Jim Palmer, the
Hmm.
Dream Business Coach, for many years, and I'm coaching with him now. He's my coach, and one of the things that he asked me quite a long time ago, he said, "Paul, I'm thinking about writing this book, this thing. It's called Serve First." And he hesitated, or he wanted maybe some affirmation from me and others, I'm
Mm.
sure, whether or not he should put this thing out. And I think I was so impressed that he asked me, first of all, honored that he asked me. And I said, yes, put that thing out there. And then he eventually wrote the book, and which I have. But how important to you is serving people first before? I know you're humble. You're the girl next door. You've got chickens in the backyard and a
Oh.
couple of young kids, and you probably have a tractor and all this other stuff too. But how important is that to you, especially being his daughter?
Oh yeah, it's so important. I remember when he published that book and I've learned so much about business from my dad and the importance of being of service. That really is woven into the fabric of interview connections, of everything we do. Serving first is reflected in so much of what we do, how we lead, the fact that we teach and provide so much value before someone ever becomes a client. People are, oh, do I have to be your client to learn this? I'm like, no, I will. There's no secrets here. There's nothing
Yeah.
behind the paywall. Like I'll answer any question asked of me, shy of it being HR prohibited or private financial information. But for the most part, like anything that we're talking about in business, I'll teach, I'll serve to the clients that we take on. If somebody's message is not of service, if somebody's message and what they're talking about on social media is not of service, we won't take them on, which has cost us thousands of dollars, quite frankly. If somebody's not using their platform to be of service and to be positive and respectful and kind, we won't take them on, we'll exit them. And so we've really put our money where our mouth is to always make sure that we're serving, that we're having a positive impact on the world, both ourselves and who we're serving as clients.
Yeah, and a couple of things you mentioned there. One thing I always ask business owners as they grow and scale, and I've seen this with working with my clients and with as an employee as well, or an executive manager or an executive in the CEO, CIO position. As companies grow, it's very difficult, but not impossible, to keep that serve first attitude all along the way. So, how are you and how do business owners make sure that their values serve first are still front and center no matter how big they get?
I think it's important to have people who will keep you accountable to those
Hmm.
values because sometimes we need reminders and just have kind of that board of directors, like the members that are going to keep you in line, a business partner, a coach, a mentor, people that will remind you of what your values are and help you make those decisions when you are feeling like you're not clear on what the best decision is. But just eating your values, I remember when Margie wrote, there was a day many years ago where she's, these are our company values. And them a guiding light when you're faced with decisions that are really difficult. Do I exit this client?
Right.
There are those decisions that are really difficult because you're like, I want the money. I don't want to lose the
Right.
money. But you're like, okay, but what is my value? Is
Mhm.
this in alignment with my value? So just defining what your values are, remembering them, and then having people close to you, mentors, coaches, partners, team members that are going to be on the same page and help you talk about those decisions when you're unclear.
Yeah. Yeah, and it happens. So it's many of the guests that I've had on here on the show we've talked about this, and some of them have some really good processes. And it starts with bringing on the right people
Mm-hmm.
and attracting the right people as mentors and maybe in your mastermind group or whatever. So it's so important as we grow our businesses to keep that flame and that spark alive with the thing that started this whole thing out for you,
Yeah.
and you want that to live on for your kids. And I don't know if they're gonna be on podcast guesting or not, but maybe they'll be chicken farmers. Who knows? But so I think that's really important. Are there any other questions that I should have asked you about how to make podcast guesting really easy for you and super effective to get clients or to be a thought leader or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish?
I think the only other piece of wisdom, not that there's like a question you should have asked, but
Yeah.
one thing I would say that I don't think we talked about is just how this is a long-term strategy. Like
Uh,
90% of podcasts don't make it past 20 episodes because so many people think that a lead generation strategy has to be instant or it doesn't work. Some of the generation strategies require, they're a slow burn. It takes time. If you want to generate warm leads, that means you got to warm them up. It takes time to warm something up. It's a long term strategy. The people I've seen who have the most success with podcasting and podcast guesting are those that commit to it long term, year after year. So just
yeah.
be in it for the long haul. It's not an overnight success type of thing.
Right. And for all you podcast hosts out there who are also thinking of guesting, you should do it for number one. But what about the hosts? How can the host make a better splash and maybe attract clients that we haven't talked about?
Oh, I love this because I also love hosting. I signed up a client on Tuesday who was like, I listened to your podcast. And I'm like, yay. I'm really
Yeah.
strategic about the topics that we do episodes on. I think that's my biggest piece of advice for podcast hosts who want to use their show to get clients. Be super intentional about what your episodes are about and make sure that they are about things that your ideal clients would want to learn about to be a client of yours. So like all of our
Hmm.
topics are about podcasting, podcast guesting, like storytelling, podcast guesting for coaches, like podcast data and stats. So we basically list out all of the biggest questions that our clients ask or our ideal prospective clients ask, and then we make podcast
Hmm.
episodes about those so that when we're in a conversation with a prospective client we can say, oh, we have a podcast about that. They're just being
Ah,
super intentional and then promoting your episode to your audience. We do promote our podcast like on social media, but for the most part, I'm emailing it to our list, I'm sending it to our clients. And like my one of my team members yesterday was telling me that one of our clients like listens to our podcast and is like referencing things that I've said in the podcast. And I'm like, that increases our retention because clients
right.
that listen to our podcast, they're more likely to stick with us long term because like they trust us so much more because we're in their ear every week.
And so I haven't listened to your podcast. I apologize
Oh, it's
yet.
okay.
Is your an interview style or is it a solo?
Done interviews. I've had it since 2014. We took a couple of years off. Right now, Margie and I are just co-hosting episodes. I've
Hmm.
released over the summer. We took a little break from recording, so I've been re-releasing some interviews that I did in years past. We'll probably get back to doing interviews, but for now, Margie and I are kind of like co-hosting it and having it together.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my podcast is interview based mostly.
Yeah.
And so you're the perfect guest for my audience because of we're talking about lead generation and how to show up and make and leverage your podcast.
Yeah.
So I think that you've been an awesome guest. I once told you were awesome sauce. You were just getting started out. I don't know if you remember that. That was really hokey, but I just wanted to congratulate you
Thank you.
on your success. So as we wrap up with your final words, Jessica, what are 3 things our listeners can do today to put these ideas into action?
Okay. So I'm all about actionable tips. So, 3
Yeah.
things they can do to put all of this into action. Number 1, open up a Google Doc and write bio topics questions it out.
Hmm.
Okay. It's going to be your podcast one sheet. Just start writing your bio, writing some interview topics, and writing some interview questions. That's step number 1. Step number 2 would be to reflect on what your goals are for podcast guesting.
Hmm.
Really think about what is your business need right now, and how could podcast guesting help you? Do you need more clients? Do you need more leads? Do you need more referral partners? Do you need speaking opportunities? So really reflect on and write out your goals for podcast guesting. And then step number 3, make a decision. How are you going to implement this? There are a few ways you could do this yourself. You could start researching and
Hmm.
pitching podcasts. You could have your assistant do it, or you can hire an agency. Honestly, I want you to take action. Take the action. Start
Hmm. Yeah.
pitching, have a team member take it on, or hire an agency, preferably Interview Connections. But like, I just want you to take action, find the implementation strategy that's best for you, where you're at in business, and get started.
I love that. And we didn't talk about pitching, did we? That's because you do it for them.
That's
But your
right.
goals and your one sheet and the topics and the questions, those all lead to your pitch, right?
It's so
Those,
simple. I don't really talk
yeah.
about pitching. Yeah, we do it for people, but people overthink it. It's You're just reaching out and just genuinely saying, "Hey, okay, Paul, I can see this is what your show is about. I understand this is your audience. This is my topic. This is why I think it's a great fit. Would you like to have me on?" It's not rocket science. It just takes time. It's a lot of time to pitch and follow up and do all the coordination, which is why it's nice to outsource it or delegate it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So you also have a free resource for people. How can we get that resource?
Yeah, so we put together, it's this very extensive 4-page checklist. As
Mm.
like I said, I love actionable tips. And a lot of people, when they start doing a new strategy like podcast guesting, they get overwhelmed. What do I actually do? So, literally, what to do from the moment you get booked on a podcast to after the interview goes live, it's in a checklist, our interview prep checklist, and you can get that for free at interviewconnections.com/prep.
Okay, great. And for those funnel nerds that are out there listening to that, this was a top of funnel offer. It's for what I would call wanderers. If Tom Poland teaches about this, wanderers, explorers, and seekers. Wanderers are the people who don't really quite know that they have yet a need, but they're just kind of wandering around getting information. And this is perfect lead magnet for that. So little instruction there for you.
Oh, I like that.
And once they become and they consume your content, I'm certain that there is a follow-up. I know that she has regular master classes that she offers. So from that point, you start to get to know and trust her, which turns you into a seeker. And I'm going to seek what else there's out there that, oh, and then find out that Jessica keeps following up and she's got podcasts. And now you've you were an explorer. Now you're a seeker and you go, I want to do this. Who's going to be the best? The founder of the first Interview Connections podcast guesting agency in the world is probably where you should go. So that's for a pitch from me and my endorsement of you and Interview Connections.
Awesome,
So,
Paul.
so thank you. Remember, faith and action go hand in hand. So keep the pedal to the metal. Until next time on the Lead Machine Growth Show, I'm Paul Guyon, your host, and Jessica Rhodes. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you for tuning in to the Lead Machine Growth Show with Paul Guyon, where we show you how to tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream so that you can transform your vision into reality. Remember to visit our website at www.leadmachinegrowthshow.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Lead Machine Growth Show.